on guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about a book. Merlin's Book, to be precise. This is an anthology of stories about Merlin and King Arthur, written by Jane Yolen. If that name sounds familiar to you, years ago I reviewed another King Arthur anthology book called the Pendragon Chronicles that had different stories by different authors. All of the stories were completely unconnected. You had a John Steinbeck story in there, you had an Ian McDowell short story, there was a Jane Yolen short story in there. That is also collected in this book. It's called The Dragon's Boy is the name of that story that was in the Pendragon Chronicles, and it's also collected here. And when I bought this, I bought it for $1. I saw it was Merlin's Book, and I read on the back, let's see, Archmage, Riddlemaster, Old Fool. Many are the names I am called by, many are the stories told about me. And so looking through this, I thought, okay, this is going to be a 20th century author's take on King Arthur, the Round Table, the Matter of Britain, and I'm a big fan of all that. For $1, I can't pass this up. What I did not know was that this book is also an anthology of stories, but all of these stories are by the same author, but they're not connected to each other. Each story is a brand new thing that is not in any way connected to any of the other stories. And it's really difficult to talk about anthologies because it's nearly impossible for me to remember each individual story here. There are some short poems here. I don't know how to talk critically about poems. Poetry is not really my thing. There are some stories in here that are like 50 pages long. There are some stories that are like 2 or 3 pages long. There's one story that is Merlin waking up after Nimue has trapped him in a tree. That's not a very long story. There's no dialogue there. It's basically just Merlin figuring out that he's been trapped. There is a couple of stories of Merlin when he's a kid. The theme of this book, I guess you could say, these stories are positioned in such a way where the very first story is somebody who is confessing to a priest that he helped deliver Merlin when he was a baby. And so we only get to see Merlin in that story when he's a little baby. And he had a tail because he's a half-demon. And it's this guy basically explaining the birth of Merlin. So there we start with Merlin when he's a little baby. And then we have 2 or 3 stories of Merlin when he's a little kid. We had one story of Merlin when he's an old man talking to Arthur. We have one story at the very end of the book where Merlin isn't even in it at all. It's set, this was written I think in 1986, and there's a story in here that takes place sometime after the year 1993. So it was set in what at the time was the future, because there's a guy there who says something like, that hasn't happened to me since 93. So it's sometime after 93. But in that one, you have all these reporters who are going to a press conference where somebody is revealing that they have found the grave of Merlin. And a lot of these stories, I will say, aren't really to my liking. The best thing I can say about this book is that you will find a story that you really like, and just as you are getting into it, then it ends, and then you have to start all over, catching my interest and getting another story started. There is one story in here that took me the longest to read. It's about 50 pages, and the main character of the book the main character of that story doesn't really come into play until about halfway into that story. It is set on Avalon. It's called something else. It's called like Evalonia or something like that. Evalonia. And this girl, Elaine, who is from the King Arthur mythos, not Galahad's mom, but another Elaine, she goes to Evalonia, and then she's kind of homesick, and we're getting all of this world building for this society that lives on this island, and then we don't meet who I would consider the main character of the story until about halfway in. And I think you don't need that much world building for a short story that we're going to be leaving here in a few pages. And I think if you're going to have a main character, you should probably introduce that main character a little earlier than halfway into the story. So I think that Jane Yolen is a good writer. There are 3 or 4 stories in here that I really liked. That one with Elaine, once we actually got into the meat of the story, I liked it quite a bit. The Dragon's Boy, I had read that one before, but I liked it. Then there's one where Merlin kind of joins some, not really circus performers, but an acting troupe, if you will. that one was probably my favorite out of all of them in here. I would have really loved to have seen a series of stories featuring that Merlin and his friends as they go on adventures doing their acting and trying to get money from people. I really like that one quite a bit. There's one where Merlin is a wild boy living out in the woods, and this woodsman captures him and tries to tame him. Thought that one was okay. Not a whole lot of conflict in that. It was just kind of, he catches a boy and then he tames him. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Really, this is going to be, you'll like some of the stories, and then some of them you may not like them. But this is not what I thought it would be when I first bought it, which was one singular story that would last the whole book. I thought that was what it was going to be, and I was excited for that. And then when that's not what it was, I was like, oh, okay, if you are going to buy an anthology of King Arthur stories, personally, I would prefer each story be by a different author. Because with this, some of these, I'm like, yeah, I really like this. And in some of these, I'm like, I don't really see what she's doing here. And you can tell Jane Yolen really likes the world of King Arthur because she is returning to these characters so many times with all of these different stories. But like I said earlier, I would have preferred that she just stick to one or two of these stories and flesh them out and make them into a larger thing. If I had to choose between this and the Pendragon Chronicles, which I talked about years ago, I think I preferred the Pendragon Chronicles. So that's about all I have to say about the Book of Merlin. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, I will see you guys in the future. Have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.